I think the key problem of the Antarctic, and we're seeing it in the Arctic as well, is that there's more than one key problem. And we're not good at managing more than one problem at a time, generally in policy world. And here, particularly in the Antarctic, we've got a huge geopolitical problem of how you manage the treaty and how you get the great powers to behave down there. And by great powers, that's just code for China. But that's running in parallel to the huge issues of climate change, which are affecting at least in Antarctica, are affecting the communities on the ocean floor and the fisheries stocks quite rapidly now. And in running in parallel with that is whether and how you can exploit the resources of the Antarctic shelf at this stage, and later on the continent. That would be much later on. But even though those issues are very much in contention, despite the Antarctic Treaty saying one thing, we also have a Camelar Treaty which allows exploitation of fisheries. So we've got a resource exploitation issue, and we've got a conservation issue of how you protect these quite unique ecosystems from further change. So we've got this plethora of issues running, and we tend to put the searchlight on one or the other at different times. And this is not the way we should be going forward. We look to the Arctic, and we see roughly the same sort of thing going on. There are issues du jour that get focused on for a bit, and then while other issues tend to languish. And in many ways, we're sort of 5 to 10 years behind what's happening in the Arctic in terms of the salience of some of these issues, and perhaps we're ahead in some, but mostly we're in a learning phase of learning how it's being managed by the Arctic Council. The key geostrategic issue, I think, for the Arctic and the Antarctic is what's China going to do? We know what Russia's is attempting to do, particularly in the Arctic. It wants to become the major power exploiting the resources of the Arctic, and in many ways it's not quite so worried about climate change, because it may turn vast areas of its territory into quite arable country over time. There'll be transitions, of course, but what China's interests are and what its long-term plan is for the Antarctic is a matter of great interest to all the other Arctic and Antarctic countries. My guess would be it wants to do in the Antarctic exactly what it does in Africa, in Australia, in South America and Southeast Asia, and that is extract resources at the greatest rate possible in terms of the political dimensions, what it can get away with, and what the technology will allow it to do. We've already seen China have great influence over the collapse of the sub-Antarctic fisheries. Most of that catch, illegal and legal, ended up in China. And I think we'll see them move down into the krill in a big way as stock feed and food enhancements for the animal market, and I think they'll try and get into that in a big way as well. Our problem with their approach to resource exploitation is that it's not, as we say these days, a sustainable approach. It's get in, get everything you can, and then get out. And I think that's that's where the geopolitics and the resource exploitation intersect. And I think that's the key and enduring problem we're going to have to face. I'm looking at it from a southern perspective. I think we can learn a lot about from the Arctic Council and how the Arctic countries have organised themselves to manage the Arctic and the resources there. But they're a smaller group in many ways. We've got nearly every middle-sized and great power involved in Antarctica because of the latent territorial issue of who owns the territory. Nobody wants anyone else to get away with something that they can't get away with, and so I think that's the issue that's unique to the South Polar regions, and we're muddling along with that. The treaty essentially kicks the can down the road, and many people say that's a good thing, but it's not actually a resolution of the problem in any sense at all.